to Collapse Astrology. Welcome back if you've been here before. My name is Hummingbird, and today's video is the second of two. Originally, I set out to make an election retrospective, but it turns out more of what I want to say is about what's happening right now. And I do recommend starting with part one, which is most of the retrospective. Today, we're going to talk about the dark energies swirling at the head of American power, the different factions and potential conflicts between them, and a little bit of tinfoil hat content at the end. Actually, honestly, it's more than a little bit, it's like half the video. So there is a big content warning for this one. As I said at the end of part one, these are some extremely dark-ass humans we're talking about, and we need to see them for what they are. We need to look directly at the black pill they've swallowed if we want to survive their onslaught. But we also need some protection. We should be feeling well-resourced and resilient when we go into this psychic territory. So, don't watch this video if you're not feeling ready in your nervous system or your spirit. And if/when you do watch, grab a hot or cold drink, a blanket or comfort object. And for this one, I really recommend some amethyst or selenite or something else that helps you call in the brightest frequencies. I will also give you a few reminders to stretch and breathe as we go through. In the first video, I mentioned the US Pluto return, a transit that peaked between 2022 to 2023. When I started this mundane astrology project as activist Astro in 2017, the US Pluto return was the center of it. The quick summary is that in those years, Pluto came back around to 27 degrees of Capricorn, the same position it has in the US natal chart, and it came back for the first time ever since the signing of the Declaration of Independence. Pluto is about karma, death, and rebirth, what has been buried resurfacing. And it was obvious to me, even when I was a beginner astrologer, that this was going to be a massive reckoning for America about its murderous past. But as you can imagine, I sounded kind of crazy talking about this stuff back then. This was before the pandemic, before the 2020 uprisings, before January 6th, before Putin's invasion of Ukraine, the Gaza genocide, the insanity of the 2024 election, and obviously before what's happening now. Actually, all of this is the US Pluto return. There are other aspects that relate, like the Jupiter-Saturn-Pluto conjunction of 2020, Pluto's entrance into Aquarius, the third US Uranus return in a few years, but all of these events speak to America's implosion, and the implosion itself is the karmic reckoning that Pluto is bringing in. Now I feel like I can confidently say what Trump and his team are doing is taking it to its inevitable climax, to the full-on Plutonian crash that I, as well as many other very different types of visionaries, always saw coming. I'm going to give as direct a transmission as possible about what I see happening here. There actually won't be that much astrology because this is based more on my studies of history and deep politics. Some people will probably think I'm being alarmist, but I would say that means that you are uneducated because history makes it clear where these folks want to take the country. I think there are a few different factions of the right whose energies are coalescing into a deadly force right now. They have different belief systems, different reasons for wanting certain policies and approaches, but they can see that they are all headed in the same ultimate direction. Together, they're like a ball of Thanatos, which was Freud's term for humanity's death instinct, headed for the United States just like an asteroid with a 100% chance of hitting Earth. And we should make no mistake. They intend that a lot of us will suffer and a lot of us will die. That's very literally what they expect to happen in the wake of the actions they're starting to take. I won't have time to get too in-depth with these categories, but I think there might be four. The Christian nationalists, the techno-fascists, the old school DS, which is RFK and Tulsi and probably some others behind the scenes and has overlap with the fake country, and Trump himself. Trump is his own category, both because he makes a lot of decisions based on who sucks up to him or who says something good about him on Fox News, and also, in my tinfoil hat theory, because the DS has cowed him, and now all of these groups are using him as a pawn. We'll get into the deeper end of that later on. But whether or not Trump is explicitly compromised, he's definitely radicalized. And he's definitely being guided by other forces who know exactly what they're doing, how to grab power, in a way that Trump just didn't during his first term. Trump wasn't an economist or a lawyer or in any of these more academic and theoretical worlds at all. So when he came in for his first term, he didn't have any clue about the real tried and true methods of seizing political power. He just thought he could throw out orders, but the US bureaucracy basically stopped him from putting any major changes into action. He didn't know what he was doing, like how to really pull the levers of power in Washington. And his people, his cabinet, etc., either also didn't know what they were doing or they didn't actually want to dismantle the state and consolidate power the way that he did. But at some point in between terms, it's clear that he's connected with people who do know what they're doing. And what they're doing is basically something the US has done to a dozen plus other countries already over the past several decades. It's a coup. And in this case, it's a coup not of Trump, the elected leader, but a coup of the political establishment, the deadweight, corrupt, old institution of American government that includes the establishment wings of both parties. In some sense, you could say it's a bloodless coup, which I talked about in one of my election videos. There's no military confrontation, no need for a leader to officially step down. But it won't really be bloodless because what they intend to do is crash the country, consolidate their wealth during the disaster, and then peace out to somewhere else in the world while America goes up in flames. So to be clear about the technique, the method, it is Naomi Klein's Shock Doctrine. So this book basically goes through country by country from the 60s and 70s in South America to Iraq in 2003. This was published in 2007, I think, telling the story of how American-backed regimes used this tactic to seize power. The tactic is called shock therapy, a combination of brutal physical repression in many cases, and in all cases, economic shock treatment very intentionally imposed on the country being couped. That is clearly what the Trump team is trying to enact here. The tactic is to make big changes all at once against the will of the people without their consent, and just to do so much so fast that people are shocked and stunned and exhausted and overwhelmed and don't know how to respond. Economically, the changes are designed to produce inflation and crash the economy, but offer a few well-positioned capitalists a chance to grab the wealth and run away with it in a few years, before the population can even really reckon with what's happening. In other countries, it involved the privatization of national industries. In the US, we don't have much industry, and almost everything we do have is already privatized, but as we're seeing, anything they can slash, they will. Now, as Naomi Klein recently pointed out, what the Trump team is trying to do is even more insidious than the economic shock therapy she describes in her book. They're trying to use shock therapy not only to make economic changes, but to force a whole religious and anti-immigrant ideology on the country. And that part, maybe it's less predictable how it will go, but the economic part is pretty predictable, and I want to lay it out for you guys. They want to crash the economy. They want hyperinflation, mass unemployment, people hungry and miserable, and unless some literal act of God happens, that is what they'll do by the end of the decade, if not a lot sooner. So, let's take a breath and stretch it out here. Timeline of the next few years for this crash also matches the astrology. Saturn, Neptune, and Uranus all change signs between now and the end of 2026. Uranus moving between Taurus and Gemini is particularly related to money and the economy. I'm not sure if there's anywhere else in the zodiac that could represent super consolidated wealth as well as the very end of Taurus. But early Gemini is the opposite. It is the energy of a big scattering. Since Uranus goes back and forth between the two, the stock market might go up and down. There might be an initial drop and then a recovery. But overall, I don't know how not to read this as a big market crash, alongside increasing unemployment as AI takes jobs, Doge keeps cutting them, and companies react to inflation with hiring freezes and layoffs. And we'll actually retreat from the next cliff edge here, which is the illegalization of homelessness and what these overlords want to do with all the people they'll make destitute, the camps, the conscription, the slavery, etc. Just the idea of a massive economic crash is enough to try to hold. And for now, it's the thing that also lines up precisely with the astrological archetypes. In fact, at least with regards to Uranus, the change might indicate a crash, but it also looks like at least some amount of wealth will be decentralized and redistributed. We're entering a new era with the tech titans, and the dudes who were behind Trump at his inauguration probably will consolidate their wealth and really become even more this tiny class of zillionaire globetrotters who think of themselves as gods. But I don't think the same will be true for regular people currently getting good salaries at corporate or institutional jobs. What I'm getting at is that I think there will be a financial malleability as Uranus enters Gemini, like a class malleability. Class structure might be flattening out, financial flow becoming less rigid and structured in some senses. Long term, the overlords seem to have plans for using cryptocurrency to help them protect their assets if the dollar loses strength. I won't really get into that, it's far from my area of expertise, but even if that's the trajectory, I think the value of Bitcoin and all the fake money tied up in crypto will not stay the way it is. And I don't know, there could be this interesting effect of leveling the playing field, people suddenly needing real skills to be valuable instead of just knowing how to move money around on a computer all day. And maybe in some situations, money can be redistributed in good ways. I don't know, maybe just trying to find a little bit of hope in it. So for real collapse prep frameworks and advice, as I've said before, please check out the Numinous Network run by my teacher, Carmen Spagnola. There's a wealth of helpful classes and information there. I will just offer a few thoughts on leaning into this difficult future. Very practically speaking, if you have some extra dollars beyond your day-to-day, I recommend spending some of them on practical things as opposed to saving them. Buy bulk rice and flour, cooking oil, coffee, nutritious shelf-stable things like nuts, jerky, dried fruit. If there are electronics or other appliances you need, buy them now if you can, since most of those things come from China and will be doubly impacted by tariffs and inflation. If you've been putting off a car or house repair, but you have the cash to do it now. If you have an opportunity to downsize your living situation and sell off some property, do it now, as long as you have somewhere stable to land. Carmen talks a lot about the idea of collapsing in place, preparing for collapse where you are right now or where you want to put down roots. If your gut is telling you your current location, work, or living situation is not where you're supposed to be for collapse, follow that guidance as best you can. There are so many ways to get actively psychologically prepared as well. Again, go to the Numinous Network for a deep dive, but there are conversations you can have with your loved ones, there are disaster preparedness steps, there are community efforts you can make, there are books you can read or other education you can pursue. So all of these are steps that you can be taking to build your lifeboat or create your cover and get ready to ride out the storm. All right, let's stretch it out a little bit again. So I'm gonna put on the tinfoil hat now. And that means we're getting into edgier, conspiratorial territory. When I have the tinfoil hat on, I talk in just a little bit of code. Actually, in this video, I don't even think there's any other code besides DS. I mostly do that for the vague hope of avoiding the AI scrapes of my content, and also because it actually feels like good spiritual protection. And the tinfoil hat itself, honestly, feels like good spiritual protection too. But yeah, take anything I say here on out with an extra grain of salt. We'll be building here on theories I laid out in the other tinfoil hat segments I've done. I think they're mostly in my 3 election astrology videos and maybe a little bit in my RFK Jr. chart read. To summarize, I had a theory going all the way back to my first prediction, that live stream I did in November 2023, that RFK Jr. would drop out of the race and end up as Trump's vice president. Here's the clip where I originally predicted that.
I think that sometime before the election, RFK Jr. is going to hop on to run as Trump's vice president. And I think that they will win. I think that actually that ticket would be a little hard to beat. You know, he's someone that is very reliable, for example, to say that he supports Israel. So that's the kind of person that they want in the position of the United States presidency. And I don't think they really want Trump, but if they sneak in a vice president, Dick Cheney style, who can control the agenda, then that would work just fine.
RFK Jr. didn't end his presidency until August of 2024, so that was from about 9 months before, when everything he was saying outwardly was indicating he was in it to win it. He was against Trump, he was against the establishment, he was against military expansionism, he was a dark horse candidate, etc., etc. People who wanted to believe in him were not having his fascist core thrown in their faces yet, although it really should have been obvious based on his position on the fake country. Here's another clip of me talking a little bit about that.
Also, he has a lot of connections to... He was on Epstein's plane, probably has a ton of blackmail information on him, but I don't think that even matters because I think he actively wants to be connected to the power that is in the military-industrial complex and in the, high-level intelligence agencies that get access to that power.
So, this stuff is much more obvious now, but it was a big surprise for a lot of people when RFK Jr. dropped out and endorsed Trump. I came to a lot of this through astrology. And in particular, the fact that RFK Jr.'s natal chart and the chart for Inauguration Day had a ton of overlaps. If you want the full breakdown, I think it's in the second of the election prediction videos. And so in those videos, which I made after Trump had chosen Vance as his vice president, I updated the theory, and in the tinfoil hat section, I predicted that RFK Jr. would somehow do a coup and inaugurate himself, either by actually unaliving Trump or by having his own military cadre of high-level guys who didn't accept Trump as commander-in-chief and who would force him to step down. And so when the actual inauguration happened, and there was RFK Jr. right back there with the tech titans and the billionaires, I felt like I was seeing the exact energy that I had been reading in the astrology, even though I had interpreted it in a little bit of a different way, a little more overtly than it actually played out. In fact, one of the most striking pieces of the astrology was Mars retrograde conjunct RFK Jr.'s South Node, which actually does look like something that happens very privately, behind closed doors. So I definitely do think that RFK Jr. is part of the team of people who either took Trump under their wing to teach him how to be a true dictator, or who intimidated him and made him subservient to them. I'm not sure which. It seems like maybe some of both. And obviously right now, it looks like Elon Musk is the one who is really controlling Trump. There's been a lot of memeing and jokes about President Musk. There's this hilarious clip with his son talking to Trump in the Oval Office. But honestly right now, I think that Musk is the kind of wild card that Trump used to be, who doesn't know who is actually in charge. It kind of seems like Musk weaseled himself into Trump's inner circle and has taken control of the show in a way no one saw coming. And I think there are deeper, more rooted powers that have a close eye on him, but they also don't mind what he's doing, and maybe they think they can reel him in if they need to. Actually, a high-level possibility is that they have a lot of blackmail on him. But going back to Trump, I don't really want to open the Pandora's box of talking about the unaliving attempts, but I absolutely consider both of them deep events. The signs are there, with both events in different ways. And I know a lot of people think that Trump himself staged the Butler event, but that is not my read. Sorry though, I'm not going to go into my specific takes on why right now. But my theory is that those events were a wake-up call from the DS to Trump. And here by DS, I'm referring to a part of the intelligence community that's directly networked with fake country intelligence, and it's an old school power network in the sense that it existed before the rise of the Silicon Valley billionaires. Counterintelligence might be the right name for it. It's been manipulating foreign policy, collecting blackmail, backing extremist groups, conducting assassinations, and practicing all kinds of other dark arts for decades. It's a lineage at the very core of the American power structure. Before Trump, there had never been a president who wasn't already subservient to the DS by the time they came into office. But Trump didn't come up through the usual political establishment gatekeepers. He bypassed them. And so he bypassed some of the lessons any career politician gets as they try to come up the ladder of power about who's really in charge, especially on issues like military and foreign policy. And Trump came in and he thought it would be like one of his companies where his word is law, where he's fully in charge. But he hit some hard walls, probably more than has been publicly disclosed, especially around the military. So I was saying it's a lineage, and this is important to understand. Because although it's not the same people running the DS for 6+ decades, it's the same power lineage. It's people with the same attitudes as to who's in charge. I mean, their defining milestone is JFK, which they did essentially because he wouldn't follow their hard line on Cuba, the Soviets, Vietnam, and other foreign policy issues. They exercised the ultimate veto. And there's a quote from someone, I can't find the exact source of it, I think it might be in a book by James Galbraith, that says something like, all the US presidents since the Kennedy assassination believed that the CIA killed Kennedy and acted accordingly. I think that there are people in those dark recesses of power who at least considered doing the same to Trump. But I think they were also open to using him because obviously, unlike JFK, Trump doesn't have any actual morals. And I think somehow, somewhere along the line, that's what became the plan. Now, I already explained the Shock Doctrine, but let's get the rest of the black pill down. The old school DS is known for a weird kind of geopolitical foresight mixed with a ton of white man colonizer arrogance. The 9/11 wars are one example. No matter what you think about the deeper 9/11 conspiracy theories, there's tons of evidence that Cheney and Rumsfeld in particular wanted an excuse to invade Iraq and Afghanistan as part of their project for a new American century. This comes from long-term thinking about where America needed geopolitical power, particularly for access to oil, and both Cheney and Rumsfeld had been talking about this since they were in government in the 70s. They had their plans ready to go, like the day after 9/11. My point there is that they were strategizing for decades about having control in that region because they'd recognized early that it would be important down the road. But we also know now that America failed at both of those efforts, trying to take over Iraq and Afghanistan. In reality, we were never going to be able to fully dominate either one of those peoples. And so in Cheney and Rumsfeld and others, you can see this foresight and this blinding arrogance at the same time. So here's my take on the black pill. The strategists behind Trump are aware of the compounding crises facing America. They're aware of China's rise and the end of Western hegemony, as shown by Marco Rubio's acknowledgement in a speech a few weeks ago that the post-Cold War unipolar world was an anomaly and that we're moving into a multipolar world with multiple powers contending for dominance. They're aware of BRICS and the eventual inevitability of de-dollarization. They're aware of the highly armed American public, and obviously they're unashamed to spread the hateful, dehumanizing ideologies that always lead to violence. And although they understand it in different ways, I think all four parties I named at the beginning are aware that this country is about to collapse. They do not have any intention that their policies will help anyone but themselves and a very tiny group of their people. They are active, deliberate accelerationists. I don't think any of the other implementations of the Shock Doctrine were done with the full-on intention of sending a country all the way into collapse. Here are a few more slides from Naomi Klein's post, and this, what she's saying, is exactly it. So those four parties I named, we have the Christian Zionists, for whom collapse and the rapture is part of their religious ideology. We have the techno-fascists, who consider themselves the secular chosen ones, chosen by the new gods of technology and capitalism, and who have no shame building their gilded bunkers and propagating their seed for the new world. We have the old school DS, which has always been fascist, so it has no problem causing suffering. And in the past, the DS hasn't been accelerationist, but this is also where the geopolitical scholars and economists fall. And they're the ones who see the writing on the wall about the end of hegemony. And then there's Trump himself. And the funny thing is, I think Trump is probably not actually a full-on accelerationist. He probably just doesn't have a choice. The people with the real power probably said, this is what we're doing, get on board, or you're dead, basically. So he's going to benefit from it, but I don't think that it would have been his top choice of a way to go if he was the one who was actually in charge. And I'll add again that I think Elon is a weird wild card here. We have to remember that there are drugs involved, on top of him just being his very strange self. And he's the richest man in the world. He has power as the owner of Twitter that's hard to compete with. So even people with the highest level of state power, military power, kind of handle him lightly. Maybe this is just wishful thinking, but if there's a big market crash, Elon might lose a lot of money. He could also go fully off the deep end with drugs, Kanye West style. I don't necessarily see him playing the same central role in the Trump administration for a super long time. Kind of think of Steve Bannon in Trump's first round. But I think right now the DS likes what he's doing. I think Elon and Trump are really both pawns in that sense, but I think Trump is actually aware of it, while Elon's not. Elon's just K'd out, surrounded by 19-year-old losers, thinking he's saving the world, while he's actually doing a lot of the dirty work for the strategists. And of course, Trump wants to fire Elon, but I think he's not being allowed to do that by the DS, since Elon's doing work that needs to be done, even if that work is just destruction and sabotage. Now, I haven't even touched on foreign policy, and obviously these people seem very hawkish. But I also wonder what the policy will actually be like. Trump has indicated he wants to move towards a negotiated end of the war in Ukraine. The fake country is another rabbit hole we can't go down today, but I think there may be a policy shift happening right now between America and the fake country. We'll see about that. And then there was this interesting thing Trump said about wanting to denuclearize and to get Putin on board. And that's another rabbit hole because the topic of nukes brings us to UIPs. So, okay, we just gotta rein it in again here. But the final piece of the puzzle is that I think the people in charge here want to create crypto safe havens for their money in anticipation of de-dollarization and of America going up in flames. I won't pretend to understand the technicalities of it, but I think we will see these people leaving America in the next 5 years. And one scary thing that some people talk about is that they might want to just drop the dollar altogether and force everyone to use Bitcoin. I don't think that's something that could happen immediately, though, although who knows with this Uranus transit. But I don't know, maybe within this 5-year timeline that we're looking at. I hope not. So, if you have made it through this whole video, you are a rock star. We started on a grim note. We are finishing on a grim note, but I really just tried to tell it like it is. Let's do one more stretch together here. So from here, I will direct you one more time to the Numinous Network, where you can find a community of spiritually and politically awake people talking about collapse and all kinds of education to help you make the best choices in these crucial turning points. And when this video finishes, I recommend taking a minute with your amethyst or other support. Sit with your breath. Notice how you feel after listening. Notice your nervous system, your mind, your chest. And say a prayer. Ask your guides for help, for instructions, because the guides see so much more than we do. Maybe you feel most connected with some bright ancestors. Maybe it is nature spirits. Maybe there's an angelic frequency or a bright ascended master you connect with. Whoever, whatever it is, call them in. The ones who can support and empower you and ask for help. All right, everyone, let me know your thoughts on all this in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I'm not sure when I'll be back next, but if you're new here, I've got lots of other nerdy political stuff that also has much more astrology than this video did, so check it all out. I also have a 2025 year ahead video you might want to check out that focuses on the personal and interpersonal astrology of the year and the trajectory it lays out, which I actually think is very empowering, despite all of the heaviness of the outer planet transitions.